Hello there. Welcome to this new series where I show off painted versions of the models that were sent into our PO box. As some of you may know, until recently I did actually have a painting log on my side channel where I'd keep track of what I'd painted and set myself targets and stuff. It's all still up there if you want to watch it. But not long after that series wrapped up, we opened the PO box, and you folks sent in a lot more models than we were anticipating. So I thought it'd only be right if you folks actually saw what became of these models and I show off the painted versions of them. So just to set the basic rules for this series: 1. The only models being shown off are ones that were specifically sent into the PO box. 2. New episodes will come out whenever I think I've painted enough models for a new episode, so every couple of months maybe? And 3, these are just the models that I've painted, because, showing off things in this kind of manner isn't for everyone, so if/when Snipe wants to show off what they've painted, well then they'll do that in their own time and in their own way. With all that said, let's get my mug off the screen and look at some models. First up, we have Gandalf, or more specifically a 3D print of one of Thomas Miller's Inglorious Wizards that was sent in to us by Walter. Since he was so obviously based on Gandalf, I went with the classic Gandalf the Grey look for him, and I'm quite happy with how he came out, especially since he was the first thing I painted after taking several months away from painting. Just to note, he is missing a little bit from the end of his gun that presumably snapped somewhere in transit, and it was so small that it could be anywhere by now, so if any gun nerds are wondering why the gun doesn't look quite right, that's why. Now we get to what I assume many people were expecting this video to entirely be: some goblins. First, we have the 1987 Space Goblin sent in by Adam. He was the very first 40k Gretchen model, and you may have noticed him making an appearance in our recent Gobbledygook video. His knife was missing when we got him. He's nearly as old as me, I'm not going to judge him for having lost it, so I replaced it with an era-appropriate knife from the old RTB01 box. There's a lot of detail on this guy between his equipment and webbing and such, so it took a little while to parse what each bit was supposed to be to paint it, but once I did, he came together quite nicely. Plus, it's nice to hide a few classic models amongst my massive mob of modern goblins. Adam also sent in this slightly later rogue trader Gretchen who's filling up his blunderbuss with gunpowder or something. I don't know about guns. Don't teach me about guns. Grots from this era tended to have quite varying aesthetics, so he looks quite different from the previous one, standing taller than most Grot models from any era really. Well, apart from the Space Crusade ones, I guess. But he does at least have a bandana around his neck, which helps him blend in a little better with my Rebel Grots, although I do have a lot of questions about how he seems to be wearing a whole-body chastity cage. Questions I'm not sure I want an answer to. Next, here's some Gorka Morka era Grots from Mike. Not much to say about these, as they're very, very similar to the modern Grot models, but they're made of metal, so they have slightly sharper edges. Still, it was interesting to paint them, as I've painted their plastic sort of remakes many times, so finally getting to paint the originals was nice. Likewise, there was this other Gorka Morka Grot sent in by someone who preferred not to be named. Again, I don't really have much to say about them because I've painted 90 of these little buggers at this point, so I find it hard to say anything insightful. I mean, in general, yes, but more specifically about painting goblins. Anyway, the same person also sent in this, a Nexan Mean Droid from Zap Figures, a long-defunct miniature company that I think came from Scotland. This mini was from around 1990, and since there was no pictures I could find online, I wasn't really sure how it was supposed to be painted or what certain bits even were, really. For example, I'm not entirely convinced that these little things at the back that I've painted as little stabilizer legs aren't actually just additional channels for casting that weren't removed before it was sold. The detail's such that it's kinda hard to tell. Still, it was a fascinating thing to paint, as the sculpt was quite murky, so the challenge was finding what detail was there and emphasising it. Went for quite vibrant, cartoony colours, as I thought it would complement its exaggerated proportions, and I think that worked out. Any excuse to paint something in Cabalite green, honestly. Oh, and the reason the base is so big compared to the model is that it had a built-in pudding base originally, but since I don't like having metal touching the table, I just popped it on a 40mm plastic one, so it could be suitably hidden and not have to be removed, as I try to keep older and rarer models intact, plus it would have been a massive pain in the arse to do. Lastly, here's a bunch of Battlefleet Gothic. We've been sent quite a bit of BFG stuff, so I thought I'd make a start on it with these 3D printed ships sent in by Sono VA. Since although I never played it, I was around at the time, when I think of Imperial ships, green with white and gold prows is just the paint scheme I have in my head when I think of them. So I once again used Cabalite green, just with a wash of Nuln and a quick dry brush of Warboss green to get this general effect. This all meant that for me, a notoriously slow painter, this little fleet took next to no time to paint, as once the dry brushing was done, it was mostly just picking out the details. There's just an almost addictive nature to painting these things. Once I've done a batch of them, I just want to start another. Plus, doing this has meant that I'm actually starting to remember what the different names of the ships are. These are Cobras, these are Firestorms, this is a Dauntless light cruiser, and this is a Mars class something. Next thing you know, I might actually start understanding how the game works. Stranger things have happened. Also, as a little extra, I painted up a couple of transports that were similarly 3D printed, but this time were sent in by Modhail. These are just little ships that are used in some missions as like generic transports your fleet will be protecting or whatever, so I was free to paint them however I wanted, so I just tried out a few different schemes on them. I also did a sword class escort, also sent in by Modhail, which is neat because you can see that there's quite a bit of variation between the different third-party recreations of the ships, which thankfully is entirely in keeping with the spirit of the game, since even in the rulebooks it says that there's plenty of variation within the same classes of ships across the Imperium. But yeah, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and a huge thank you to everyone who sent in the models that I've painted. I'll see you next time, where presumably I'll have painted like 30 more Battlefleet Gothic ships.